Well, we are here today with one of my favorite humans, Emma Benoit, and this is part of Bark for Schools and the State Board of Education webinar series. Kathy Davis, who is the State Suicide Prevention Coordinator, contacted me and said, we have this great parent education webinar series we need to do. Who do you know? And so Emma was one of the very first people that I reached out to. And so I'd like to introduce you to Emma. I'm going to have Emma kind of talk about her history and who she is and where she's from and all that. And then we'll jump into a few questions on our webinar.
So hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, however you are, wherever you are this today joining us. It's good to be here with you guys. My name is Emma Benoit. I am a suicide attempt survivor as well as a mental health advocate. I was born and raised in the state of Louisiana, a Southern girl, so down South Louisiana. And I grew up pretty typical, normal life from a middle-class family, very spunky, charismatic kid. But aside from all of those great factors of my life, there were some negative factors. I struggled with anxiety and depression for multiple years without ever telling anyone of my struggles. There were multiple reasons and factors that I was struggling, only I was unaware of the depth of those struggles. Not really knowing much about mental health, not really understanding the coping skills that are needed and necessary for really youth to navigate life's stresses and struggles, I kind of fell victim to my own mental health. And ultimately, when I was 16, dealing with all of those struggles, they became too heavy and I became extremely hopeless. And because of that hopelessness and that struggle and never really talking about it, never feeling like I had a safe space to go with these emotions and these thoughts, I ultimately attempted to take my life. Following that suicide attempt, I learned so much and I've grown so much. And one of the biggest things that have come out of my attempt is my new appreciation for life and my desire to share my experience with others, especially young people, so that way they don't have the same outcome that I did. I am very fortunate to have survived my attempt. We know that not many people get a second chance. So with my second chance, I have decided to dedicate my life to using my experience to try and raise awareness and fight that stigma that is one of the biggest factors in the issue in my experience and that I've seen and learned. That stigma is a real issue when it comes to people seeking help and expressing their true feelings and thoughts. So I have kind of used my experience, the knowledge that I've gained, and kind of just living life in general and come up with ways to share my story in an effective, efficient way that doesn't trigger, that doesn't pose threat to the issue, but only amplifies the efforts of spreading the positive awareness around the issue. Because while my story is a heavy one and has some dark moments to it, it ultimately is a story of hope and redemption. And I feel that everybody can have that same outcome for their story. So I'm so grateful to be a part of this and excited to share more of my knowledge and my experience with you guys.
Thank you so much. So part of how I learned about Emma is her story was made into a film, actually by an Arizona native named Greg. Just through her film, I was able to not only learn about Emma and her family and her friendship group, but also about all the awareness that she raised after her attempt. And then the pieces that struck me as a high school teacher, counselor, and mom of four teenagers currently, was really that, when you look at Emma, she kind of had it all. She was a cheerleader. She had great parents. Is a faith-based person, a large friendship group. She was doing some modeling. When you look at some of our kids on Instagram and TikTok and all the things that they have access to, those are the highlight reels of our kids' lives. So Emma, could you talk a little bit about tell us when social media became a part of your life? So you graduated high school in what year?
So I graduated high school in 2018. So social media really kind of came into the scene whenever I got to middle school. I got my first cell phone when I was 13, turning 14. So I really kind of started to tap into the social media world towards the end of middle school, beginning of high school, so eighth, ninth grade. And from there, unknowingly, it was really damaging my self-esteem and my view on reality. But over time, it just became more of a problem. And the unfortunate part of that problem was the fact that, like I said, I was unaware that that was a major trigger for a lot of my self-esteem issues and a lot of my own personal problems that I was dealing with. Social media became a trigger for that, because of the comparison aspects and the pressures that are just innate with society and this younger generation feeling the need to keep up with the Joneses, for lack of better words. And so I kind of started to deal with that at a pretty young age.
What year or what grade were you in when you started to recognize, like, I'm having these anxious feelings? I might have depression, even though you didn't maybe disclose that to your parents. Like,
Mhm.
when did you know that maybe you were suffering from anxiety and depression?
So I actually started to feel symptoms of anxiety in elementary school. My anxiety was extremely social anxiety. So I dealt with the fear of being judged, not fitting in, and really just that feeling, that physical feeling of anxiety really started to manifest within me when I was in elementary school. Not knowing the language around it, I thought that there was just something wrong with me. And so that anxiety, that feeling carried on with me as I grew up, and it never really went away. It just circumstantially changed as my life kind of evolved.
So middle school and high school are not easy years. Fun, lots of fun
Mhm.
sometimes, but also when we see a lot of bullying, cyberbullying, kids obviously saying and doing things that are not very nice. Even they might even be your best friend. They might exclude you, in things that you thought you should be included in. So do you feel like that was accelerated by social media? Or did it not really play a part in that piece of like those physical signs of anxiety that you were having?
100%. Social media definitely came into the picture and amplified all of the negative things that were already existing in my reality. I was dealing with, like I said, the need to fit in elementary school, that fear and anxiety of not being good enough, not being accepted, not being quote unquote cool. And then social media came into the picture, and it was like I could never escape it. So what I dealt with at school during the day, I would get home and it would be in my face nonstop 24/7 because of the social media and because of the fact that I had access to Snapchat and Instagram. And honestly, all of those apps at the time were not monitored, right? It was very
Mhm.
new to the scene. So I definitely dealt with a lot of online struggles in a way. I never really dealt with cyberbullying, fortunately enough, but I did get caught up in a lot of online drama, back and forth chatting, nasty messages, things like that.
And as far as your parents' level of awareness and education around phones and social media, do you feel like at the time that they had a grasp of what you had access to? Like, did you have your phone in your bedroom overnight? Like, a lot of parents are much
Mhm.
more aware now than when you were in high school. Do you feel like, I find a lot in our work here at Bark that parents are like, oh, she's a good kid. She'll be fine. Like, don't talk to strangers on the internet and you'll be good.
Yeah,
Do you feel like your parents had a grasp of what you had access to?
not at all. Not at all. And I think mainly because their social media was Facebook.
Yeah.
My social media was Instagram and Snapchat. So
Yeah.
they were not even on those platforms really
Yeah.
up until I got onto Instagram. Then my mom created an account to kind of monitor my post and whatnot. But as far as the access to the content that's out there and the information that's out there on those platforms, I don't think that they were truly aware of the extent of it. And yeah, I had my phone in my bedroom, and that was really honestly the biggest issue for me. Late at night, after I would get done with my homework, I would just stay up scrolling, you know, into hours of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning sometimes, and that was really toxic for my mental health.
Yeah, for sure. So, in thinking about, and I don't want to give too much away because I'm going to direct people to watch your beautiful movie, My Ascension. In thinking about the runway to your attempt, looking back, what were the signs for you? Because for everyone, it's a little bit different. But if we were to kind of rewind, 1 month before, 3 months before, 6 months before, were there outward signs or were they pretty cryptic or both?
I would say pretty much both. There were some outward signs, though. For example, when I got to my junior year of high school, I decided that I was done cheerleading. And prior to that, cheerleading had always been my life, my passion, my desire, the place that I felt most comfortable. So I gave up cheerleading. And that was honestly one of the first big red flags that I kind of threw up. And the reason I decided to not try out was because I had completely lost the passion. I'd lost the desire to show up, the desire to try. I was just done with it. And so following that, things just kind of went downhill. After I decided not to try out for cheerleading, I began partying later, staying out later, hanging out with a new group of friends who weren't my typical crowd. So that was a sign of concern. But ultimately, most of my warning signs were sort of masked as what is known as typical teenage behaviors, right? I was isolating myself when I was home. I was constantly in my bedroom by myself. And when I wasn't home, I was always out with my friends. So it was never, I was not getting that quality family time. And so because of that, my relationships with my family became strained. And so when I was really struggling with my depression the summer before my senior year of high school, all of those factors had just kind of slowly fallen into place. And I would say the tipping point for me was feeling so hopeless because I didn't have that connection or relationship with my parents that I really needed at the time. So I felt like I couldn't go to them. And then the thing that really tipped it over the edge was that factor. And then the fact that I was on a trip 3 days prior. And so 3 days prior to that trip, I was, kind of on cloud nine, a high of life, experiencing this new city with this new group of friends. It was a modeling trip. So I felt confident from being asked to go on that trip. And so all of those factors kind of just culminated and led to that suicide attempt. But all of those struggles, like I said, were present years prior. It just, for whatever reason, the months leading up, things just felt more amplified.
Yeah. And in your movie, the opening scene is really part of the attempt. So again, I don't want to ruin things for people, but in thinking about access to means and the how am I going to do this and when am I going to do this? I have read the research says that typically that thought pattern of like this is what I'm going to do is anywhere from 30 seconds to like 2 minutes. Like it's a very short amount of time that people actually say like, okay, this is when I'm going to do this. Did you find that with you that it was like a pretty quick sort of irrational moment? And then after, I know you said in the movie you were immediately regretful.
Absolutely. Yeah, for me, it was definitely very, very short window of time that I had that thought and then acted on it. Prior to the attempt, though, I do want to mention about 3 months before my attempt, I began dealing with intense suicidal ideations. I began thinking of ways that I would do it if ever that moment arose. And so I kind of began thinking of ways, thinking of means, having those suicidal ideations, but was so terrified of them, so frightened of those thoughts alone, that I would have never uttered that to anyone. So prior to the attempt, I had sort of an idea of how I would do it, but definitely the day of, it really went by really quick. Like I said, the second that thought came into my head, it was a matter of minutes that it happened, and it was extremely impulsive. And immediately after it happened, I had an insane feeling of regret. It was almost like the regret took over my body, and I couldn't feel any physical pain because of how strong that regret was. And in that moment, it sort of felt like my entire perspective shifted in a way. So where I went from feeling hopeless and lonely and sad and lost and confused, I went to feeling scared and frightened that I might die and that no one would really know the truth and my story. And so it was truly, to experience such a dichotomy like that was wild.
Yeah, I bet. So the movie is called My Ascension. And that name, how did you come up with the name My Ascension?
So my ascension is kind of a double meaning. So I actually grew up in a place called Ascension Parish, where other states have counties, we have parishes in Louisiana. So I grew up in a town that is known as AP, Ascension Parish. And then the Ascension side of it that isn't relating to my hometown has to do with my faith and my spiritual beliefs. So I really view my journey and my experience as a redemptive story and a story where I ascended over all of the hardships and all of the trauma that was present in my life. And I really view what I have gone through as an opportunity to overcome it and bring others up with me. So it's kind of a double name meaning. But my ascension, it that is the name of the film. And I couldn't be more connected with the film and the name of the film. It all really kind of came together seamlessly. And I definitely didn't have any plans to create a movie on my story. So that partly is a reason why I decided to go with the Ascension title, because I feel that some of this, if not all of this, has been kind of ordained by a greater force.
Yeah, for sure. So I've had the opportunity to see the film, gosh, at least 6 times. We've brought Emma to Arizona via BARC for school several times, and she is just a fantastic resource and speaker, connects with audiences and children and grandparents and community members and politicians and people that maybe have a different view on this and have some stigma around this. She really shifts the conversation. So if you are seeking a great resource who just really connects with people, I highly recommend bringing Emma to wherever you are. I've seen her speak at large conferences. I've seen her speak at a church. I've seen her speak at a movie theater, all sorts of places that you can bring Miss Emma. And so I guess my last question for you, and this is something that has stuck with me since I met you. And I think it was at the end of one of your speeches at the church, you said, silence keeps no one safe.
Mhm.
So I know you have a couple other sort of taglines. So we know that, no one should worry alone. Silence keeps no one safe. What else do you want this larger, broader community to know? So we probably have students watching this webinar, parents, educators, possibly the Attorney General of Utah, all sorts of fantastic people. Like, what if you could just like sum up beyond, not being alone, silence not keeping us safe, what's one last thing that you can impart to our audience today?
Yeah, so I would say aside from all of those great pieces of advice, the biggest piece of advice that I want people to take away with them is understanding and acknowledging we all have pain. We all go through hard things. Life is a challenge. We all experience different challenging things on the day to day. So it's so important that we never invalidate anyone's experience, never invalidate someone's reality, always encourage them to express their reality as they experience it, because in doing so you are just going to give them the green light and open that door to then come to you with any kind of other vulnerabilities that they might be struggling with. That's the one thing that my family has done a complete 180 on, and it's been the most beautifulest blessing to watch unfold, is how we communicate. So I would just want people to learn better ways to communicate with yourself, be kinder to yourself, speak positive to yourself, and then do that to others. Speak positive to others, speak kind to others, and encourage them to open up, like I said, with those harder, more vulnerable conversations, because I truly believe that by avoiding having more difficult conversations, you aren't really keeping the peace. You're just keeping the disturbance within the person, right? So becoming comfortable, becoming uncomfortable is a necessary spot that I think as a society we really have to get to if we want to see actual change in terms of mental health in general, right? So I would just encourage, try to work on communication with yourself and others, and always remember that, and I know we've probably heard this quote a lot lately, especially after 2020 and COVID, but it really is okay not to be okay. Like I said prior, life is challenging. So the sooner we can admit that, I think the sooner that we can allow people to feel safe, seen, and valued in their struggles.
For sure. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to offer some resources. So we know in the state of Utah, they have a fantastic app called Safe UT. So every child, every adult, educator, and even National Guard has resources right in their hand. It's a text tip line. It's a safety line that is all part of an app. We also have 988 nationwide, obviously, finding trusted adults, finding trusted siblings, cousins, people that you can talk to. There's so many people out there that care about our kids, care about us as adults as well. So I will include some of the resources that we at Bark offer families as far as monitoring and supervising social media, video game platforms, text messaging, all the things that we do in the chat and as a resource as well. But Emma, thanks so much for being here today. I know you have a busy year coming up, so thanks for making time for the state of Utah.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks. That was so great. You're so good at this.